Hi everyone, this is Alex. For a while now, I had been intending to tell this tale. The channel has been a little quiet lately. Honestly, it takes time to locate these real-life stories. If you appreciate what I produce, hitting that subscribe button would mean the world to me, as I'm dedicated to providing you the greatest stuff. Your help maintains this channel open. Alright, let us start this. This entire process began with the death of my grandparents. The lake cottage that my parents inherited was where we had spent many summers growing up. It was more than simply a house. It was a memory of bonfires, fishing expeditions, and peaceful afternoons spent swimming. As we grew older, life interfered. Emily, my sister, and I were occupied with our own lives following school. The lake cottage was virtually empty by the time I was 30 in 2017. I was just starting to seek my first place. My parents hardly visited there, and it seemed like they were clinging to it more out of nostalgia than anything else. Since I started my first job at 24, I had been saving assiduously until at last I had enough for a down payment. So I assumed my dad wanted to follow up on my house quest when he phoned one evening. Boy, was I wrong. Any success finding a place yet? Not yet, I responded. Still looking. Well, your mom and I were chatting, and we think you should buy the lakehouse. I was astonished. He hesitated before saying Emily had just entered her ideal college, a costly private school. Wait, what? You're selling it? Though the reality of the tutoring was beginning to weigh them, everyone was delighted for her. Her hoped-for scholarship had not come through, and my parents could not afford to pay the whole fee. Convinced it would ruin her financially, they were dead set against her getting out student loans. Therefore, their answer is, sell the lakehouse. My mind whirled. The lakehouse belonged to our family heritage, not only some real estate. Selling it seems like losing a bit of ourselves. But my dad was already presenting it as a win-win. We'd rather sell it to you than some stranger, he stated with sincere voice. You love that place, and it would stay in the family. I was tempted, but I won't lie. It seemed awful to consider someone else possessing it, altering it. But it also felt like I was on show. Emily's schooling hung precariously, and it was very evident that purchasing the house would be how I could contribute. It was about family obligation now, not just about the house. I asked whether they would have thought about other possibilities, maybe selling something else, but they felt this was the only way. It's just sitting there anyhow, my mother said. You would be doing us all a favor. The guilt trip was placed on heavy. I gave in after much backtracking and under pressure from their expectations. Though it still wiped away most of my funds, they gave me a family discount. I urged myself it was well worth it. I was helping Emily and really adored that house. Right, win-win? Not quite exactly. The first few months were a whirl. To make the house livable all year round, more work was required. Given that I worked remotely, a big problem was the outdated plumbing, leaking roof, and lack of internet. On weekends, I visited the hardware shop. On evenings, I watched YouTube tutorials trying to find out how to remedy problems. Though most of it fell on me, my dad helped with some of the more major projects, including roof replacement. Although renovating was costly and demanding, seeing the old building come alive was very fulfilling. By the time I formally moved in, it no longer seemed like a vacation house. My house is where I live. I personalized the space with fresh paint, new furniture, some contemporary additions including a smart thermostat and improved lighting. Living full-time at the lake was a big change, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. It wasn't ideal. The greatest difference was the silence. The house was always crowded growing up, relatives, friends, even neighbors dropping by for a barbecue. Right now, it was only me. Originally, the silence was unsettling, but I came to enjoy it. I settled into a new rhythm. Morning coffee on the porch watching the sunrise, evening walks along the lake, weekends spent fishing off the dock or taking the canoe out for a paddle. Rising to birdsong instead of car horns, falling asleep to the soft lapping of water against the shore. Though after years of city living, the stillness felt like a gift. I couldn't get rid of the impression that my family still considered the house to be theirs. It wasn't the most fascinating life. As though I hadn't poured my life savings into the property, my mother would call and say things like, "It's so nice that you get to live there rent-free." I brushed it off at first, thinking they just needed time to adjust. My dad would remark on wanting me to preserve the house true to its roots. Then arrived the requests. Could they spend a weekend away from the house? Could Emily arrange a visit with her buddies? Usually I answered yes to maintain peace, but it always felt a little strange. This was my house, not a vacation home anymore. Still, they behaved as though I were merely borrowing it. By 2019, the lake house was where I had made my life. What I had accomplished made me proud. My girlfriend Sarah moved in at that point. Sarah loved the house just as much as I did, and we had been together for some time. It seemed like the logical next step. It was much better still to have someone to share it with. Together, we began working on projects including erecting a fire pit near the lake and a garden. We would roast marshmallows over the fire in nights, then discuss the future. Sarah also helped me see the house in a fresh perspective. It felt like the life I'd always wanted, simple, calm, and bursting with little pleasures. She urged me to make it our own while I was concentrating on honoring its past. We hung pictures, put some oddball decorations, even painted the entrance door a brilliant blue. It was a minor adjustment, but it made the place feel especially ours. Emily announced her engagement about the same time Sarah moved in. For some years, she had been seeing Ben, her college boyfriend. Everyone liked him. Over the moon were my folks. The engagement dominated every family conversation. My mom began talking about wedding arrangements right once, and my dad was already working out how he might assist pay for it. Every phone call, every holiday celebration, all of it wedding, all the time. Still, I had no trouble at all. Emily seemed truly content, and Ben was a decent man. I agreed to join in the wedding party, and Sarah and I even started searching for the ideal present. At first, everything seemed great. Originally set for 2020, the wedding was postponed, just as many events that year were. Everyone was glad Emily had something to look forward when she changed it to December 2021. Looking back, there were indications that my family hadn't entirely accepted that the lake house was mine. I believed we would at last be over the drama of the lake house. I couldn't have been more mistaken. My dad would periodically drop clues about how much they missed visiting the family lake house, and my mom still called it that. Telling myself they meant nothing, I attempted to overlook it. Deep down, though, I knew it would not be long until it resurfaced. I began to feel as like I was treading eggshells around my family as Emily's wedding preparation gathered steam. Emily was really important to my parents, and I knew they would do anything to make her happy. A few weeks before the wedding, Sarah and I were enjoying a peaceful evening on the porch. What I didn't realize was just how far they would go or how much they would require of me. The lake house was quiet, and I assumed the wedding turmoil was occurring far enough away to keep from reaching us. She then asked a simple question that turned everything upside down. "Where are you and Sarah staying for the 2 weeks after the wedding?" I wrinkled, perplexed. At home. Why?" She sighed as though I were being dense. "That's not going to work. Ben and I will be staying at the lake house for our honeymoon." For a while, I felt I had misheard her. "Wait, what? You're staying where?" "At the lake house," she said, as if it were the most clear-cut thing on earth. "Mom and Dad said it would be fine." I staggered. She waved that aside as if it didn't matter. "Mom and Dad said it was fine? It's not their house to offer. It's mine. It's perfect for a honeymoon. It's private, romantic, and we won't have to pay money on a hotel. Plus, you and Sarah can go stay somewhere else for a couple of weeks. It's not like you lack options." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her voice changed to become defensive. "You're asking me to leave my own home for 2 weeks so you can have a free honeymoon? Are you serious right now?" I inhaled, trying to retain my cool. "It's not a big deal, Alex. We're family. You've had the house for years. Can't you do one thing for me? It's my wedding." "No, Emily. I'm not leaving my home so you and Ben can stay here. If you want a romantic honeymoon, book a hotel like everyone else." She began with the guilt trip. She continued on about how all the delays would lead her wedding to deviate from her ideal, and now I was aggravating things further. I was disrupting her particular moment, she argued, and I was selfish. When that didn't work, she became irate. "Fine," she yelled. "I'll just take you out of the bridal party, if you're going to act like this." I shrugged. "Do what you need to do." She felt off balance from that. I didn't backtrack. She was expecting me to. She hung up after a few quiet seconds. I sat there staring at my phone, half expecting my folks to call next. Certainly enough, my mother was first. She lost little time in going right to the point. "Mom, it's my house. She didn't even ask me. She just assumed she could stay here. That's not how this works," she said. "What's this I hear about you refusing to let your sister use the lakehouse for her honeymoon?" She said, "We've always shared it, and it's not like you'd be giving it up permanently. It's just 2 weeks. Why are you being so difficult?" I could feel my irritation mounting. "It's not the family lakehouse anymore. You sold it to me in 2017, remember? I paid for it, and I've been living here ever since. You can't just decide who gets to stay here," my mother remarked, her voice tinged with displeasure. "She's your sister, Alex." "No, Mom," I responded decisively. "She didn't get the wedding she wanted, and now you're ruining her honeymoon too? Don't you want to make her happy?" She had little to say following that, but I could sense she was boiling. "I don't think it's my responsibility to give up my home so she can have a free honeymoon. That's insane." She hung up, and a few hours later my dad called. "Alex, your mother and I believe you're making a mistake. Your approach was less emotional but equally frustrating." "Dad, I've already done plenty for her. This is about family. Your sister deserves this after all she's been through," I said. "That was years ago," he dismissed. "Do you remember why you sold me the house in the first place? It was to pay for her college tuition. I've already helped her more than enough." "Small? You're asking me to leave my own house for 2 weeks. That's not small, Dad. That's a huge ask, and it's totally unreasonable." He sighed loudly. "This is different. It's her wedding. You're not going to let her down over something as small as this, are you?" "I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this." I was done at that moment. The following day, my sister texted me to let me know I was formally uninvited from the wedding. "I'm not being stubborn. I'm setting a boundary. This is my home, and I'm not letting anyone tell me what to do with it." She accused me of trying to spoil her happiness and being self-serving. She said I was the reason she couldn't have the honeymoon she had always wanted. I didn't bother answering. What then was the point? Sarah was exactly as annoyed as I was. She had made up her mind, and nothing I said would alter that. "I don't understand how they don't see how ridiculous this is," she remarked. "Your house. You shouldn't have to explain yourself." She was correct, but it didn't make any difference. My folks kept phoning, alternately guilt-tripping and simply embarrassing me. Nothing I said could persuade them otherwise. They made it plain that they believed I was in the wrong. Though it was tiresome, I wouldn't waver. I wasn't going to let my family guilt me into selling my house. To put it mildly, the days following my sister's revelation were tense, and I was not invited to her wedding. It was the regular assault of calls and texts from my parents that really got to me, not only the quiet from her. Hammering the same themes over and over, they appeared intended to wear me down. They claimed me to be selfish, thoughtless, and worst of all, a lousy brother. My blood pressure jumped every time my phone buzzed. The worst were from my mother. She would begin with something like, "I'm so disappointed in you," then begin a guilt trip on how Emily had already gone through so much with the postponements to her wedding. It invariably concluded with some version, "Can't you just do this one thing for her?" My dad wasn't any better. One evening he left a voicemail almost making me toss my phone across the room. I didn't bother phoning him back. "Alex," he began in his most serious dad voice, "this is about family. Your sister deserves to have her special moment, and you're the one standing in the way. I hope you think long and hard about what kind of brother you want to be." Too furious to engage in a meaningful discussion, I grumbled to Sarah, pacing the living room. "They're acting like I'm the villain in all of this. They care only about making her happy, no matter what it costs. They don't care that I've already sacrificed for her. They don't care that this is my house." Sarah nodded compassionately. "It's not fair," she replied. She was correct, of course, but that didn't make dealing with them any easier. "You've done more than enough for your sister. They can't keep asking you to give up more. At some point, they have to respect your boundaries." I felt like the bad guy upsetting my family, yet I also wanted to stand my stance. In the middle of all this, I received a call from my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. Emily was acting the victim, posting cryptic messages on social media about how selfishness was ruining her special day. She has always been the more grounded member of the family, hence I believed she may provide some viewpoint. I chuckled bitterly when she stated, "So I hear there's some drama going on with the wedding," after a few minutes of catching up. "You could say that," I told her everything. How Emily wanted to use the lakehouse for her honeymoon, how my parents supported her back off without even asking me, and how it all collapsed when I said no. I didn't hold back. I vented about the entitlement and the ongoing guilt-tripping from my parents. There was a long silence when I came to finish. Hearing her say that felt like a weight off my shoulders. Then Aunt Carol said, "Alex, I'm going to be honest with you. Your parents are way out of line here. That house is yours. You paid for it. They have no right to treat it like a family freebie just because it used to belong to your grandparents." For weeks, I had been wallowing in remorse, wondering whether I was the one in error. Your parents have always babied her. This is the result. They've set her up to expect the world on a silver platter, and now they're upset because you're not playing along. That's not your problem, Alex. Stand your ground. Her comments provided me the clarity I needed. I felt, for the first time in weeks, not insane for speaking out for myself. My parents and sister could throw all the tantrums they wanted. I wasn't going to move. The wedding passed, and as usual, I was absent. Neither of my sister nor my parents got in touch. From a few pictures I came across on social media, the ceremony looked to be lovely. Emily was shining, and my parents looked proud but exhausted, probably from all the tension they had been under. Though a little depressed about missing it, overall I was grateful to have avoided the drama. Sarah and I spent that weekend at the lakehouse, savoring the peace. We watched a movie together, made a great meal, then headed out on the lake. It was easy and peaceful, precisely what I needed following weeks of stress. A few days after the wedding, my mother called. For once, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells around my family. Not equipped to cope with whatever guilt trip she had scheduled, I let it go to voicemail. When I did at last pay attention to the message, it was what I had expected. Knowing what she was trying to do, I was not going to let it affect me. I had chosen. My parents had decided upon theirs. That was on them, not me, if they couldn't accept my limitations. Following the wedding, I felt the drama could at last begin to recede. Naturally, though, I misjudged my family's capacity for resentment. One day, around 1 week after the wedding, I received another message from my mom. Their campaign of guilt-tripping changed from pure wrath to a tone of tired disappointment, like I had personally deceived them. I rolled my eyes as I listened to her say, "Alex," her voice gentle but strong, "I don't know why you're doing this. Your sister is devastated. She thought you would be there for her, but instead you let her down. I don't know how we're going to move forward from this." Their remarks no longer hurt as much by now as they used to. I had been obsessing too much about whether I truly was the selfish one in this context. But following all of this, I realized I wasn't. This was about them defying my boundaries, not about me being selfish. Sarah, as usual, was my rock. "You don't owe them anything," she told me one evening as we sat by the fire pit we had created together. It was true. You've done more than enough for your sister. They just can't handle the fact that you're finally saying no. I had been the dependable one for years, the one they could count on to pull through difficult times. Conversely, my sister had always been cuddled. Though it meant putting me on the back burner, my parents leaned over backwards to make sure she was pleased. I had grown accustomed to it, but this time they had gone too far. A few days later, Emily texted me. Opening it made me unsure of what to expect. Perhaps another accusation or some passive-aggressive comment, but instead it startled me. "Hey," she wrote, "I didn't know the lake house was legally yours. Mom and Dad told me you were just living there rent-free. I didn't realize they sold it to pay for my college. I'm sorry for assuming I could use it without asking. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was a step in the right direction." For that, I was glad she seemed to finally see the whole picture. I gave great thought to my response. Though I wanted to let her off the hook entirely and avoid revisiting the whole dispute, Ultimately, I decided on something straightforward. She didn't reply, but I didn't take it personally. Thanks for reaching out. I hope you and Ben are happy together. Let me know if you ever want to talk. Though it wouldn't solve everything, at least she would have recognized the circumstances over the next 2 weeks helped things calm down. Though it was good by me, my folks still weren't talking to me too much. I was in need of space. Sarah and I concentrated on our lives at the lakehouse, organizing little tasks and forward-looking plans. Letting go of the drama and emphasizing what truly mattered felt nice. One afternoon, my Aunt Carol called. "How are you holding up?" She said. "Better," I responded. "I'm glad to hear that. I think things are finally calming down," she added. "Just remember, you're not the bad guy here. Your parents and sister might not see it yet, but you've done the right thing by standing up for yourself. Don't let them make you doubt that." Her comments really stayed with me. I had neglected my own needs for so long, so totally preoccupied with maintaining harmony. But this circumstance had forced me to draw a line. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about putting myself first. This whole process taught me a lot about boundaries and self-respect. It's okay, my relatives might never get my viewpoint. What counts is that at last I developed the ability to stand my ground. The lake house is my dwelling, not merely any house. I don't know what the future holds for my connection with my parents and sister. Sarah and I have established our life here, and I am not going to let anyone take that away from me. Perhaps over time things will get better, or perhaps they won't. In either case, I'm at peace with my choice. Right now, I'm concentrating on the life Sarah and I are creating together. Though it's not ideal, it is ours and enough. Living at the lake cottage became second nature. After the wedding, the first conflict subsided and a peaceful grief followed. Notwithstanding all that had happened, I missed my family, including my sister. I was also aware, though, that I could not return to things as they were. Sarah remained my steady friend through it all. The old practices of enabling and guilt-tripping were too firmly rooted. She knew my unhappiness, irritation, and residual guilt. She never let me wallow in self-pity, but she also never pushed me to heal with my family. Spring arrived and brought with it a surge of fresh life. She had a way of gently pulling me back towards delight, reminding me of the life we were making together. Our weekends were spent caring to the garden and observing the seedlings stretch for the sun. Walking great distances in the forest, we inhaled fresh air and smelled earthy, moist leaves. Once quiet and frozen, the lake warmed and shined beneath the sun. One evening, as we sat by the fire pit, Sarah turned to me, her eyes glistening in the firelight. We had taken the canoe out and paddled along the beach, seeing the ducks and geese return after their winter migration. Her remarks really impacted me. "Alex," she added, "I know this hasn't been easy for you, but you deserve to be happy, and you deserve to have a home where you feel safe and respected." I leaned in and planted a kiss on her, then felt thanks flood over me. Having someone in my life, a partner who saw me, encouraged me, and loved me without conditions, was a blessing. As the weeks evolved into months, the quiet from my family got less terrible. Every now and then my mother texted me, generally a brief note about the temperature or a holiday greeting. I answered well but stayed away. I wasn't ready to participate in their emotional tug-of-war. Then, one day my dad called. Not sure what to anticipate, I paused before responding. Though he still didn't quite accept the years of aiding Emily, it was a start. "Thanks, Dad." Not a complete apology. "I appreciate that." We spoke for some time, catching up on everything. I told him about the garden when he mentioned his new woodworking endeavor. Though it felt like a bridge had been gently extended, there was still a space between us, a fragility absent before. A few weeks later, my mom called. She agreed with my dad's apologies, noting they had treated me unfairly. Emily and Ben were expecting their first child, she also informed me. I complimented her, a flutter of affection toward my sister underlining everything. Perhaps, just perhaps, having children would change her viewpoint on life. The news of Emily's pregnancy set forth a flood of nostalgia. I considered the lake house, and the memories we had created there were young. I phoned my dad and let him know I wanted Emily and Ben to spend a weekend at the lake house. I knew I wanted my future nieces or nephews to grow up knowing that place without experiencing the delight of swimming in the lake, roasting marshmallows over a fire, and falling asleep to the sound of crickets. He was ecstatic, and I could hear relief in his voice. When I spoke with Emily, she first hesitated but still carried past weight. The weekend they visited was awkward at first, full of cautious talks and lingering silences, but I reassured her that I wanted to move forward, that I wanted her and Ben to have a role in my life, and that meant sharing the lake house with them. But something changed as we watched the flames lick the night sky from by the fire pit that evening. We began telling tales, laughing, and remembering our early years. Though it was only a beginning, the lake house, formerly a cause of strife, became a site of healing. It served as a reminder that there is always an opportunity to pick up the fragments and begin over even when families trip and fall. Emily and Ben took their newborn son Noah to the lake house next summer. Emily, bright and calm, Ben beaming with pride, and little Noah curled in a soft blanket sleeping sweetly in her mother's arms, a picture-perfect scene. My parents were there too, their expressions marked with a mix of happiness and a slight guilt. Their former complaints apparently forgotten, they watched Noah with admiration. Once a battlefield, the lake house was now a haven for a new generation. As I watched Noah sleep, I became quite protective. My nephew, this small human, stood for rebirth and optimism. He was a reminder that although strained, familial ties could be healed. Over the next few years, our family dynamic changed. I promised him to be a good uncle, to build fresh memories at the lake house, ones loaded with joy and love, not conflict and hatred. Emily and I drew near, our common love of Noah bridging the distance between us. We spoke much about our lives, our hopes, and our worries, as well as Noah's. Her tantrum on her wedding day also apologizes, acknowledging that her coddling had blinded her from entitlement and driven her. My parents, too, softened. At last, they seemed to realize that their job was to help their kids, not merely pick favorites. Often not as invited guests, but rather as beloved relatives, they brought baked pies and tales of their week to the lake cottage. Once more it became a meeting spot, but this time it was different. Mutual respect and a knowledge that this was my house, my haven, permeated everything. Not taking my generosity for granted, my family handled it with care. One crisp autumn afternoon, we assembled at the lake house for a family BBQ while the leaves blazed with color. There were Emily and Ben with Noah, a wild toddler roaming the backyard with unbounded enthusiasm. There were my parents, their laughter blending with Noah's happy screams. And Sarah was there, her hand in mine, her presence a silent source of strength. As I turned burgers on the grill, the air smelled of charcoal and sizzling meat, and I felt great calm. Originally a sign of strife and hostility, the lake house had come to represent love and pardon. The sun sank below the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of orange and purple. We could come together here, not as ideal people, but as a family, flaws and all. We roasted marshmallows around the fire pit and told stories. I knew the trip had been worth it when Noah, his face covered in chocolate, curled up on my lap with his small hand gripping mine. The suffering, the resentment, the frustration, all of which had preceded this, had produced a fresh sense of family, a closer knowledge of love and forgiveness. A silent observer of our challenges and victories, the lake house was evidence of the strength of family, a lighthouse of hope in the evening darkness. Years elapsed, seasons changed, and the lake house stayed our compass. Noah got taller, his trips marked by even more adventurous fishing trips and bold cannonballs off the shore. Emily and Ben ultimately received another child, a beautiful girl named Lily, who soon became the darling of the family. He learnt to swim in the lake, just as Emily and I had, the cycle of family legacy continuing in the rippling water. Her contagious laughter filled the house, sweeping away any last traces of the past. My parents, now grandparents twice over, appeared to have at last discovered a quiet rhythm. Their faces softened with time and the healing power of family, so they spent their days loving their grandchildren. They nevertheless sometimes fell back into old behaviors, giving unwanted advice or trying to gently guide events their way. Now, though, I could gently push back, establishing limits without running afoul of the delicate calm. Sarah and I were living at the lakehouse at the time. We remodeled the attic to make it a comfortable studio where gifted artist Sarah could paint and develop. Our life wasn't without difficulties. I kept working remotely, my office facing the calm expanse of the lake, a continual reminder of the peace I'd discovered. We had failures and disappointments, doubtful and unsure times. One summer evening, as the sun sank below the horizon and created long shadows across the grass, I sat on the porch with my dad. The lake home stayed our refuge throughout all of this, a place where we could withdraw from the world and reconnect with what really mattered. Though it cannot be undone, the past can be forgiven. As the years went by, the lake house changed, bearing witness to birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies blink to life in the gathering darkness. It turned into a tapestry spun with the family's enduring energy, laughter, and love. One day not so long ago, I was standing on the porch watching Noah teach Lily how to cast a fishing line. The walls carried the echoes of children's laughter, the aroma of freshly made pies, and the warmth of many shared dinners. I felt a great thankfulness in that moment as the light glinted off the lake, birdsong filled the air, and a little breeze rustled the leaves in the trees. Once a cause of strife, the lake house has evolved into a symbol of resiliency, evidence of the continuing power of love and pardon. And as I watched my niece and nephew, their faces shining with excitement and delight, I knew that the lake house, this place of peace and belonging, would always be a part of our family narrative. Memories were created here, bonds were formed, and the spirit of family lived on generation after generation.